888-213-4208. That's 888-213-4208. Or visit us online at www.thegusmangroup.com.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, more of the greatest talk on earth.
And the diversity just keeps on coming.
Your superstation, AM 1050, News Talk KCAA.
KCAA, well, not KCAA Morning Show. We're the Two Sides with Erin and Tobin here on KCAA AM 1050. So this is our inaugural show as Two Sides with Erin and Tobin, and so we're first day here. Tobin, how you doing?
I'm good, but I'm confused. Which side am I?
You're the right. I'm the far right.
Okay.
We play both kinds of music, country and western.
That's right. Well, we actually had a fierce debate about what to call this show, and I'm still wanting two sides. People want to know, what is the two sides, Erin?
Well, my side and your side, male side and female side, and not respectively, obviously. And so we're.
But don't we agree on everything? I mean, we're a married couple.
Good grief! Tell me a married couple that agrees on everything.
Oh, I don't know. My parents always seem to get along pretty well.
Yeah, that's just what you saw, because they were good parents.
That's right. They hid it from us. I bet they're listening right now, too.
Oh, I hope so. So, we're glad to be here. The reason why we decided to do this show is that there's so much going on in the city of San Bernardino and in surrounding communities and in our nation. It's an election year, pivotal election year, I would argue. And we want to be able to get people talking and to rationally talk about the issues in a calm and collective way. Well, maybe not so calm and collective.
Well,
collected.
We are going to focus on San Bernardino today, but we're going to be talking about a lot of different issues. In fact, I wanted to start with a little shout out to some friends of mine. I believe, because yesterday was the end of the filing period for elected office, I believe two of our friends are running unopposed for re-election on the Colton School Board.
Oh, yeah? Who's that?
Laura Morales and Pat Haro.
Woo! So, okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We'll have to have them come in at some point and talk about what the Colton School District's facing, because like a lot of public entities, they're facing difficult budget cuts as well. And, if the governor's tax measure doesn't pass in November, they're going to make hard choices regardless, but it'll be even more difficult.
And the reality is, as everybody's throwing around blame in every situation, that it's a tight fiscal situation nationally, statewide, in our county, and in our cities. Every school district, every municipality is dealing with budget cuts right now because there's just less money to go around. And we have to refrain from calling each other names, refrain from doing the things that come naturally. It's his fault, it's her fault, et cetera, and start thinking about honest solutions.
I agree, and there's no easy choices left in America.
No.
People have
We've kicked that can as far as it'll be kicked.
We've been sold a bill of goods, and on that line, I'm so excited by the announcement this morning that Mitt Romney selected Paul Ryan as his running mate, because it shows a real seriousness to the Republican ticket and a willingness to confront the hard issues, which we haven't seen from President Obama or from George W. Bush before that. And it's time that we had someone who's willing to look us in the face and say, you know what, guys, this is not going to be about easy things. We're all going to have to give up something and work hard to bring America back from the brink.
But doesn't he want to kick Grandma off Medicare?
No, he does not. That's the talking points of our Democratic friends. But basically, everyone who's on Medicare would stay on Medicare. It's talking about in the future and how do we make it so that there's a benefit there for folks in the future. And things will have to be different. It's the same kind of thing that I've been talking about locally with pensions. I'm not saying that we would kick people off of the pension program they're on today. I'm simply saying that we have to make changes today. And so, it's the same basic idea, just writ large for our nation.
Well, I hope that people misunderstood, or they chose to misunderstand the Ryan budget. The goal for Ryan was to say, here are the hard topics. There are no sacred cows. We're going to talk about everything and engage me. Let's have this conversation. The American people want us to have this conversation. And instead, of course, that didn't happen. It was all political because that's the nature of things. And I am actually feel excited about the Paul Ryan choice as a Republican because he will. Both of them together are adults in a world of blame-throwing children.
I agree. And It's time for us to start looking at these big issues and making the tough decisions. I'm tired of people passing the buck and pointing the finger.
Oh, well, and it's, well, you just don't care about seniors. Well, you just don't care about minorities. Well, you just don't care about women. And I have to tell you, the war on women, now, as a woman, I can speak about this, it really offends me. I am not so helpless that I need the government to be my daddy. I'm not. I can hold a job. I've paid for my own education. I, managed to stay married. I think that's important to stay married.
Those are throwback ideas, Erin. We live in a modern world, and I think you just have to, figure it out a little bit different than that, because you can't just be out there having a job and having your own opinion. I'm sorry.
I don't need the government to pay for my birth control. If they want to, if my employer wants to, that's fine, but I don't need the government to do that. I'm perfectly capable as an adult to be able to take care of my own needs.
Let me ask you a question. When you went and looked for jobs, did you sort them out based on who was going to give you that benefit? I mean,
No.
was that the benefit that was the straw for you? Like, I'm not going to work for them because they don't pay for that?
No.
No?
I couldn't have cared less.
Yeah, and most people don't, I think. I mean, you go for the job that's in the field that you want to be in.
Right.
Working with people you want to work with, hopefully getting the pay that you want to get.
Well, and corporate culture to me is more important than anything. I want to work in a positive environment, and the benefits are great. Benefits are terrific. I mean, you need medical benefits. I say that, but I don't think it's the end all be all for women. I really don't.
Well, I'm a public school teacher, and one of the things, if you talk to teachers, I don't know any of them that went into the profession for the pay or the benefits. That's really not.
Although they are pretty good.
They are. I mean, they've gotten better.
The benefits are good.
The benefits are really good. But if you talk to people about why they became a teacher, it's because they love children. It's because they want to make a difference in the world. It's because they're excited.
But don't get me started about your union.
Well, we're going to have some really good conversations about unions and union activity. I think we look at that a little different from some folks, but I think it's an important conversation.
Yeah, I agree. So let's talk about some of the things. Let's talk about San Bernardino. Our favorite topic, San Bernardino, because we have a guest coming up later today. We're going to be talking to City Clerk Gigi Hanna. She's newly elected and went through some struggles to get elected. She won by a very slim margin, and it was challenged several times, including going to court. But I'm thrilled that she's there personally, and because transparency is the word of the day. As this is going on for the residents and citizens and voters and taxpayers in San Bernardino to trust the process, they have to be able to see what that process is. When things start happening behind closed doors and people's imaginations can start going crazy about what's happening, it's just bad for everybody. Rumors abound because people will make the mental leap themselves. Yep. When a city is transparent, then we all know what's going on and we can have those discussions. Having said that, it does mean that there have to be adults in the room. So, that's important too.
People are desperate for information about what's happening in our city.
They are.
And our city clerk is our conduit to that information. So I'm excited to have Gigi here. Although I have to tell you, I was a little confused when you first said we were going to talk about transparency. I mean, I thought we were going to be over at the Pioneer Cemetery looking for ghosts. To be
really?
Honest, no, well, and honestly, I mean, we're not far from the cemetery. We're actually here in the Mall of the Dead. At the Carousel Mall, right? And we can talk about the glories of the past and how transparency is needed so that we don't ever have this happen again.
Okay, but the glories of the past, part of our problem is a city. And our city is obsessed with people who, I was born here. Well, the guy who moved here 5 years ago still has a house here, has his children going to our schools. He matters too. We all live here. And I know that San Bernardino was an all-American city and we all want to be there again, but we cannot look backwards as our model. The city has changed. The Air Force Base is gone. The economy has changed. And so we need solutions for it today because looking backwards is going to get us nowhere.
Well, and one of those solutions has got to be more transparency. I mean, obviously, a lot of things went on in our city, and people didn't know that these things were going on. And, being a former city councilman, it would be easy to say, oh, the information was out there. And a lot of it was, but there's still a lot of stuff that was hidden. And I struggled as a councilman to get answers to the questions I wanted, and I know some of my colleagues have made the same complaint. And so I think one of the first things that we can all get behind, every one of those city council people, the mayor, Mr. Penman, everyone who's involved in the city can get behind the idea that we need more transparency. And now we need to talk about what does that mean? What does that look like? What are the questions that are not being answered? And I'm hopeful that Gigi will help us to to kind of flush that out and figure out what
and
it
to
is.
tell us, most people, and if I weren't married to you, it would be more difficult for me, but most people don't know where to go. I mean, you go to the website, what department am I looking for? Do I go to finance to get budget information? Do I go to public safety to get crime information? Where do I go? Where is that information? How do I find out who voted for what? And is there a way to get it without having to plow through, ask for all the copies and plow through thousands of pages? How can I get the information that I want online?
Well, and another area of weakness that we're experiencing is that the media industry as well, the news industry, has been devastated
Yep, it has.
by new media, by the internet and other things, and they're not making as much money, and so they've laid off people at the newspaper. You don't have that kind of in-depth reporting that you used to get,
Right.
Where the reporters have been there for years and they know every person, they have all these sources, and they can come and bring things forward. They're watching the council meetings at home on TV and making a few follow-up phone calls or emails and then writing a story, and sometimes they get it wrong.
Well, and the net effect is that the council meetings are often these grandstanding episodes where people will go off on a tangent and stand in a soapbox and pontificate for 10 minutes and really, in essence, say absolutely nothing that's relevant to anything, but it looks good on TV, and so that's becomes the story, and that's unfortunate. They hijack the message.
5-hour-long, 6-hour-long council meetings where even the community members who show up to speak get tired and leave before they get a chance to say their piece or ask their questions,
Right.
because they've been sort of filibustered into the ground.
Yes,
It's really sad.
Filibuster is the right word. I definitely would agree with that. And the thing about it is, I get that politicians, this is what they do. They want their constituents to know, I'm working for you, I'm here for you, you elected me for the right reason. But you can do that and be a statesman too.
I agree. Now, you mentioned filibuster. We've got to really be careful with Gigi Hanna. She's an elected politician. She might try to filibuster us, so we're going to have to keep a real close eye on her.
We can shout her down.
Well, honestly, Gigi is a friend. We've gotten to know her since she got elected. But I want people to know we're going to ask her some tough questions today.
Yes.
We want to put her on the spot and test her out a little bit. She's new in the job. We're going to see what she can do.
Well, and the reality is that her office is extraordinarily important because she's the one who holds all of those documents. That's what the city clerk does. Is they manage all of the paper that comes out of the city council and goes to all the departments, and so it's very, very important that person be extremely organized and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I want to share some good news. One of the questions that I had asked while I was on the council and before I left was about when the city started paying for the employee share of pensions, and I wanted to see the actual resolution and who voted for it and understand all that. And I actually finally found it last night.
Oh, when was it?
Well, it was back in. I'm just going to mess up my dates now.
2005?
No, it actually started in 2000 for police and fire, but the vote was in 1999. And
wow.
Thankfully, Gigi Hanna, our city clerk, gave me a tool to help me to search through old minutes and old documents, and so I was able to do that and found it. Now, it took a while because I had to learn how to put in the right search terms and figure it out. And like a lot of search engines, it gives you a lot of documents, a lot of stuff comes back, and then you have to try to search through those and figure out which one's the right one. And I finally was able to find it. And I really went searching last night just because I knew we were going to have Gigi on here. And I give her great credit for allowing me to have access to this tool to search for these documents. And I think a lot of people want to be able to go back and see. And they're putting all those documents online. People want to understand, how did we get here?
Right.
What caused all this?
And let's be careful here. We don't want to blame anyone. 1999 was in the tech boom.
Yeah.
Money was flush, and people wanted to reward employees. I get that.
Yeah.
I totally get that. Unfortunately, where we often make the mistake, we look at the money we have now and say, well, why wouldn't I share the city's largesse with our hardworking employees, police and fire, but all of the bargaining units. But the reality is that the good times never last, just like the bad times never last.
Yeah.
And so you have to prepare for the cycles. And it's an older city. At that point, they did know that the base was going to be closing because those rumblings were there all the way.
The base had already closed
In 99?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the base was. We knew. Okay, my bad. But they knew that changes were coming.
Yeah.
That things were not going to be staying the same.
Yeah. Well, and then just a couple years later with the September 11th attacks and what that did
changed
to
everything.
Did to our economy, And then we sort of rebounded a little bit in the mid-2000s, and people were feeling healthy again, and that's when they went and did the 3% at 50
Right.
and some of the other things that I think, in that moment maybe seemed like a good idea. But if you look at the long-term consequences of that, you're looking at one-time money, or this year is a good financial year, and you make a decision that's going to go on forever.
Forever,
you know?
right. Well, and there's something else that they did. Wasn't there a bond passed?
Yeah, they passed they did a pension obligation bond, and that's an area that I'm just really starting to delve into and learn about. And I actually also last night found the documents for that. And in March of 2005, they brought in 3 consultants and had a wonderful meeting about that. We'll talk more about that later.
So you're listening to Two Sides with Erin and Tobin on KCAA AM 1050.
Real talk for real people. Right here in the Inland Empire. We are 1050 AM KCAA.
So we're back. This is Two Sides. I almost said live with Erin and Kelly. This is Two Sides with Tobin and Erin, or Erin and Tobin, Two Sides on KCAA AM 1050. And I do want to tell you that there are multiple ways to enjoy the show. We are on Ustream but you can go to kcaaradio.com and you can check us out. There are apps for your Android phone, for other smartphones. We're on Ustream. We'll be on YouTube here soon with this, and also on terrestrial radio at KCAA AM 1050. So we are back, and now we have joining us Gigi Hanna, who is the newly elected city clerk in the city of San Bernardino. How you doing, Gigi?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
So tell us about yourself, and what does the city clerk do?
The city clerk is basically the public's link to its city hall. So she is the records keeper. I would love for her to be the archivist in this city, but we're not there yet.
And I'm sure you're busy right now.
We're a little busy. We respond to requests for information from the public, from the council. The city clerk is also the local elections official, the compliance officer for things like the Fair Political Practices Act, the Public Records Act, the Brown Act. Probably the most visible role is taking notes at the council meetings, but that's actually a minor part of the job. But we take the claims that people file against the city. We are kind of the first stop when people come to City Hall.
So, and do the people go to the city clerk's office for business licenses and things like that?
They do. We have two divisions. One is the business registration, and one is the admin.
Now, if I need a passport, can we do that right here and right now, just live on radio?
We can't. In fact, we did have the passport acceptance facility, which was something we were very proud of. We've actually moved that over to the library. They haven't opened up yet, but it was a function of the budget cuts. We felt that the library could respond better to the public's need, longer hours, weekend hours,
Gotcha.
better than the city clerk's office.
Oh, well, at least we can go to the library, so I don't have to go to LA or anything to get my passport.
Not just yet.
Okay.
They are working on the process. Until they get that up and running, you can still go to the main post office.
Oh, and on 5th Street in San Bernardino?
Correct.
Okay, cool. Very good. So you came into office at a challenging time in the city's history, to say the very, very least. And your run was very challenging. There have been dramatic cuts in revenue, as revenue has plummeted over the last few years. What are the challenges facing your office?
Well, like all of the departments, we were asked to cut up to 30%, and the cuts have been coming for so many years that unfortunately that meant staff. So I'm down about 5 people.
Ouch.
Indeed. Some people retired looking, they saw the writing on the wall and decided they'd rather not risk their retirement. Some people left because they found other jobs, and I had to unfortunately lay off a couple of people. But I think we have an efficient staff. We are definitely skeleton, but I think we can continue. I've made the cuts that I think are strategic. And
I'm worried for you, though, because just my information requests alone require 1 full-time person, I think.
At least. And actually, I want to tell you about we had one public records request, and I think I mentioned this to Erin before, last week, that was 12 different items, but one of the items alone was over 38,000 pages.
Wow.
Wow, think of all the trees that have been killed. And
Yes.
did you require payment up front for that one?
Yes. Those, in fact, I would like to see the cost for paper copies lifted from 15 cents per page to 25, which is more consistent with what most cities do, and it would be a very quick revenue generator for the city.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and let me ask you this: if somebody wants that information, but they're fine looking at it online, can they do that?
Absolutely.
And then you're not killing any trees, and then they don't have to deal with 38,000 pages.
And it also saves staff time, and with the reduction in staff, that's all a benefit.
Well, before we go on, I just have to give you kudos because you've actually put a lot of really good information on your webpage for City Hall. I love that you put, 10 years worth of budget information out there.
Right.
So people can get that history. They're not just looking at the current bankruptcy documents, but they can go and get that full history. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And that hits the biggest problem in the city to date has been, in my opinion, a lack of transparency. That the public doesn't know, and then they hear rumors, and some of those rumors come from the dais. I mean, from the city council dais. So, but it's much better if people have access to that primary source documentation and they can see what was actually said and see what was actually voted on. So, that's really important. So, talk to me about your philosophy of transparency.
Well, transparency is basically operating in a way that people know what you're doing, and easily know what you're doing.
They don't have to hunt and sit through 7-hour council meetings?
Exactly. So when I came on, we already had been digitizing records, but my focus is I want to make them much more easily searchable, put a lot more on the website than is there. Make it very clear what the actions were taken rather than necessarily all of the posturing taken to take the actions. And
because we do have, there have been times when council members will make an argument on one side, argue, and then they vote for the other side. That happens a lot, actually.
Yes, and
Yeah.
one of the first things I noticed when I came on, I think this was in April, either late March or in April, we were going through the transcript, or going through the minutes of the meetings, the record of the meetings to do the minutes, and there were something like 17 pages of transcripts on one public hearing item, and there was no actual progress being made during that discussion. It was just back and forth, political posturing. I mean, there was some valid argument also, but so much of it was just I felt obfuscating the real issues.
Right.
One of the tools that I would love to see at some point in the future is a way to click on a particular council person or whoever and get their voting record. So you can just search for one person to see how they voted on various issues. And I know that's challenging. And in fact, one of the requests that I had asked for when you put the budget information up was how they voted on the budgets. And it actually took a little bit, but you got it fixed. So now it lists who voted for what, because the first one was just the budget document,
right?
And then we wanted to know, well, who voted for it?
And part of that is just learning how to structure how we deliver the information, and actually this whole process has been fascinating. The bankruptcy filing, just the budget questions, because we are getting a lot of requests, and it's helping me focus and better understand how people want to get that information.
So I can guess that your office has been absolutely inundated for public records requests since the bankruptcy.
Yes. We get about 200 to 300 counter visits a day. And I was looking at our numbers from June, and I think officially in June we had about 38 public records requests. And it's almost 10 times that in July, and it's going higher and higher. And I expect that'll continue to happen for the next few months, especially as the lawyers get more involved. They are doing a lot of the requests themselves. The lawyers both working for and against the city.
Right.
Now,
well,
does someone actually have to physically come in to make that request, though? Can they call in? Can they email? What's the process? What do they have to go through?
There are several ways. You can do it online. If you go to the city's website, there's a tab at the top that says "How do I?" and if you pull that down, you can. There's a section that says "Request Public Records." You can also go to the city clerk's website on the city website and do the same thing. It's just another way in. We have a smartphone app that you can download and make requests on. Seriously?
Cool.
Again, from the website, there are. Some people just email me because they know my email and say, hey, I'd like this information. We get a lot of those. My records people aren't as happy about those because they're harder to track. But some people call in. Some people come into the counter. We take requests anyway.
Now, when someone requests something, what's the process that you have to go through? Because is it just a matter of, okay, here's the document and I find it and I hand it to you, or do you have to go through other steps before you can give that information out?
It depends. We have the authority to hand out the documents that we have. I mean, we are a public agency protecting public information. And when we have the document in our hand, we will just hand it over. And those are the really quick responses that people get. If we don't have the document for whatever reason, and sometimes I think it's just a matter of people not knowing what the city clerk's office is supposed to get versus what their department is supposed to keep, then we'll go to the department and say, we have this request, can you give us this information? And they'll hand it to the city clerk and we can hand it, or they can hand it themselves to the requester. In some situations, the department will want to go to the city attorney's office. That's not a requirement. All the documents that have gone to a council meeting are public and should be readily available. But people get a little nervous, you know.
Is anything that goes out have to be redacted?
Yes, we have, say, if you go onto our website and do the search like I had suggested to Tobin, there are several subcategories of files, and say public campaign statements. When people are running for office, they have to file notices of where they've spent their money, who they're getting their money from, and those are public with some redacted information, addresses, things like that.
Well, that's good, and also if there's a personnel issue, know,
Right.
you don't want to give that personnel issue. You don't want that out in the public because that's protected information.
And I don't even get that information. You know, a lot of the personnel stuff, the city clerk's office doesn't have a reason to have, so we don't have that.
So when Tobin was a city councilman, he asked repeatedly for the city to show pension costs in its budget. The council never took formal action to do that and instead said, trust me, it will be added to the budget. Of course, now that the bankruptcy has occurred, it has come out that the pension costs will be almost $25 million this year. That's a lot of money. Almost double what they were in 2006. My question is, can citizens create a ballot initiative that that would require transparency, specifically the demand that every item in the union contract, or any item in general, have its line item? So if it affects the budget, it would have its own line item in the budget.
Well, I'm certainly not a lawyer, but I can tell you about the initiative process. So as far as whether that is doable from a legal standpoint, I can't answer that. I would suggest, it seems logical to me. But once you had that and you had your statement, if you wanted to try something, you can follow an initiative process. We have it very laid out. I've been sending this out to many people who've asked about the process lately. So if you'd like me to tell you about it, I can briefly.
I would love to hear about it, because I'm actually very seriously interested in creating an initiative that would require transparency, because I was stymied as an elected official in this city trying to get information. And even the people who I sometimes would argue with on the council would say the same thing, that they couldn't get information that they wanted. And so I can't imagine anybody standing up and saying, no, we don't want transparency, that we don't want to make this information as easily available, and in fact requiring it to be presented in the budget and shared with everybody.
Well, I tend to be a disclosure kind of junkie. I think that people cannot make smart decisions without knowing the facts. So,
well, duh.
So to me, I'm all about transparency and open government, and that's been my focus all along. So let me tell you, this is just a general outline of actions required. The first step is you need to request a ballot title and summary, and you file with the city clerk's office this request, addresses of the proponents, notice of intention, 1 to 3 proponents, written text of your initiative, and the reasons for the proposed petition, as well as a $200 filing fee. I get that, and immediately send that on to the city attorney's office, which will review the language and
right, because it has to work with the charter.
Exactly, but and that has to be done. That review needs to be done within 15 days. After that's reviewed, I furnish a copy of the ballot title and summary back to the proponents, and at that point, the proponents can start circulating a petition. There's a little, you have to to file some like an affidavit of publication with my office and everything. But basically, after you have your ballot summary language, you can begin to circulate the petitions, and you have 180 days to do that. So 6 months to, let me see. Then you turn that in. The signatures are examined for
Because they have to be residents of the city of San Bernardino.
Right.
Do they have to have the ability to vote? I mean, so
Yes,
they have to be over 18.
registered.
They have to be registered.
Registered
Okay.
voters.
That's important. You can't just,
Right.
find homeless people and give them $1 to sign your whatever.
And of course, based on my recent experiences, I would suggest that make sure everybody's signature on their petition matches the signature on their voter registration
very
certificate.
important. As you
because
know, that is very important.
that is very important. And the number of signatures required for an amendment is 10% of the registered voters. And I think that's actually a change. I think it used to be 15%, but it's 10% according to the League of Cities. And
Now, the
that's
registered voters are the voters who actually voted in the last election.
registered voters. And that's a slightly different, because there are portions of the charter that have, for certain kinds of changes, you have to have a percentage of the last vote, people who voted in the last election in a certain ward. But this is citywide, and it's all of the registered voters, which as of, say, last October, this would be slightly different, was by now was around 73,000. So if you were trying to get an initiative going, you'd need approximately 7,300 signatures.
Of registered
Registered, valid voters
Wow.
in the city of San Bernardino.
Now, we can get walking lists. If a citizen
Oh,
wanted
yes.
to do this, they could pick up walking lists, and would they get that out of your office, or would that come from the registrar of voters office?
That comes from the registrar of voters office, and it's something you purchase. It's not very high cost. Most candidates who run for office have to do that as part of the process.
Well, let's say you got your signatures,
Mm-hmm.
right, and you're ready to go now. Who picks up the cost of that election?
Well,
Who pays for it?
basically, if it were a council-led ballot, the city would pick that up. The proponents need to pay for it, and
So the proponents, so the number that was thrown around at the last council meeting, and this is important for people to know because now they're thinking, well, do we need to do a ballot initiative? What would it look like? But the number that was being tossed around was about $120,000. So the proponents of the ballot initiative would have to raise $120,000.
probably, and that's kind of the high end. Unless you could find a preponderance of the council to vote, I think, to support this, and I think with our current budget situation, you couldn't.
Yeah. My understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding is that once you got the ballots, once you got your signatures, that then the city would be on the hook for paying for it.
Who paid for
I-
Measure C?
I
And maybe
thought
we
the
can't
ci-
answer this today. Maybe it's
Well,
something
I
that we
thought
have to
the-
look
I thought
at.
the city did.
And I
but-
think politically-
but Measure C was put on by the council.
By the council.
They didn't
Oh.
go get signatures.
It does cost the city,
Yeah.
but I think if you're going to be effective, I think you kind of need to have some cash behind you too. I know that some people
yeah.
have been talking about it because the city does not have the money.
No.
Yeah.
But the 120, I just wanted, and what the registrar of voters said was 90 to 120. They gave us a quite a big
Window,
difference,
yeah.
and that refers to the cost for the county of running of putting the initiative language in the ballot, printing the ballot, sending it out to all of the voters.
okay.
And that was for this upcoming general election, which
That was.
would be cheaper because they're sharing the cost with a lot of other entities.
Right.
Whereas if you end up doing it as a standalone special election, that's going to change the cost. And then also how you do it, whether it's
Right.
just a mail-in election or whether it's, you actually have poll workers, all of that adds to the cost and changes it. But I would share that
Yeah.
if I go forward with this, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking just from my heart here, because I have a real heart to go do a transparency initiative.
Mm-hmm.
If we do this, I would want to raise the money to pay for the election, and hopefully I would be shocked if somebody came up with an anti-transparency campaign. I don't know how you run that campaign. That I don't want us to have the costs of pensions and things like that shown explicitly in our budget, which they haven't.
But
been
not
for
even
decades.
not only pensions. I mean, it's
Yeah.
everything that costs
Everything.
the city money.
Everything.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I think the citizens are better served knowing where their taxes are going.
I
Well,
agree.
we've been talking to Gigi Hanna. We're going to hold you over the break. Is that okay?
Sure.
So we're listening to Two Sides with Erin and Tobin on KCAA AM 1050.
Real talk for real people. Right here in the Inland Empire. We are 1050 AM KCAA.
So we're back. This is not live with Erin and Kelly. You see, I've been on KCAA radio doing the morning show for the last 3 years. It's been great fun. You just heard our silly promos. And I'm so used to plugging other shows that I'm just going to be plugging Live with Erin and Kelly, which is on KCAA AM 1050 on Thursdays. And the time has moved, right, Erin?
It will move in September.
Erin is in the studio, and it's going to be moving in September to 2 right now, to 2 o'clock. Right now, you can hear it at 11 a.m. On Thursday afternoons. But this is actually Two Sides with Erin and Tobin, and we're sitting here with the City Clerk of San Bernardino, Gigi Hanna.
I still haven't figured out which side I'm supposed to be, though.
Well, and I was wondering if maybe I was the other side.
No, we've got the male side and the female side.
Well, Gigi, since we've got you, I got to ask your opinion on this. We actually fought about the name of this show, and I really thought, being the obnoxious Republican that I am, that we should call this the I Told You Show. But
because Tobin talked about bankruptcy for years.
But I was overruled and said that maybe we should be really nice.
That's a little obnoxious. That's a little over the top.
But, so now it's Two Sides with Erin and Tobin.
It's Two Sides with Erin and Tobin.
But every now and then I'm just going to shout out, I told you show, I told you show.
So I do want to say again that our listeners, if they go to kcaaradio.com, you can watch us online on Ustream. You can listen to us on your smartphone. There's many ways to enjoy any of the shows on KCAA AM 1050, including Two Sides with Erin and Tobin. So, Gigi, let's pick up where we left off. This is kind of a tough question. I'll put you on the spot on this one.
Good.
Others have complained that money was transferred from restricted accounts without council approval. In LA, they have an elected city controller that is the financial watchdog, chief auditor, and accountant tasked with improving efficiency, saving money, and conducting financial and performance audits. Do you think San Bernardino needs a similar position?
Well, I think that's a decision to be made by minds other than mine.
Come on.
We do have a finance director, and currently our finance director is an auditor, and I think that you're seeing the benefits of that right now. But as far as whether the position ought to be elected, I think that should be left up to the voters. And
You're so neutral.
I try.
You're Switzerland.
Well, there's pros and cons, obviously, to this.
Right.
And creating another position, another department, there's costs associated with that. But, if you are able to recognize cost savings and get some of the efficiencies and things, and I'm not sure a city the size of San Bernardino can really afford a controller, but now that we're bankrupt, you could argue, I'm not sure we cannot afford. I mean, that maybe this is something we should have had.
And the treasurer, maybe the duties need to be shifted to include more, to have different kinds of duties. And I will say that, we've talked about this on the morning show. On August 23rd, 2010, there was a budget meeting, and all of our leadership, city attorney, not the city attorney, I'm sorry, city manager, city treasurer, and the city finance director, not the city attorney, presented the fact that the city was headed towards bankruptcy at that time. All the city council was present, city attorney was present, and the mayor was present.
Well, and the first person to bring up bankruptcy was David Kennedy, the city treasurer. And, I've actually seen a few folks online today even asking questions about where has he been and how come he hasn't been more out there and vocal about what's happened.
But he's not a politician. He's an accountant.
He's an elected official.
But he is an elected official.
And so people want him to be a voice and be out there talking about it. And I think he's going to have to at some point come forward. Maybe he'll be a guest on our show at some point.
We'd love that. We'd love that.
But, I think you're right that maybe instead of doing a controller, maybe his position needs to be expanded. He really only does the city treasurer job part-time. He's only in the office a couple days a week because it's not the current way the job's set up doesn't require a full-time person.
Because there is a finance director, professional staff person who manages the financial staff.
Right. Yeah. And that would be a function of a charter amendment would be changing the duties of the treasurer.
Yeah.
Right. And we're not being critical of him at all. We're just wondering what would make the most sense in this situation and to avoid this kind of thing from happening again.
And I think these are great conversations to be having right now. And if there's any benefit to what's going on in the city, it's that now the average citizen is actually talking about this stuff.
Well, and honestly, this is a conversation I would have preferred to have seen at the last council meeting, is talking about, how do we, we're in this mess now of bankruptcy, how do we get so that this doesn't ever happen again. And talking about the idea of expanding the duties of the treasurer or creating a controller position is along those lines, talking about transparency. And, instead they argued about a lot of other stuff. And I wish we could get some more serious conversations about what's happening in our city.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Some residents have suggested that the mayor and city manager abuse their discretionary spending authority. Both are allowed to spend their budgets without city council approval, so long as it's below the $25,000 per contract. $25,000 per contract. Is there a way to make discretionary spending more transparent, such as requiring every expenditure over $5,000, under $25,000, be reported on the internet within 10 days of the time the contract was signed?
Well, anything's possible, and there is a section under the city clerk's website, again through Laserfish, which is the program we use for digitizing the city documents, called contracts under $25,000, and people can go in there and see what contracts have been considered under 25. The problem with that is we're not consistently getting those from all of the departments. I don't know if that's just a matter of confusion, if there's anybody trying to keep us from it. I don't really think so. You can look at the contracts. You can also look at the purchase orders. All that's public, and I know that Jason Simpson, the finance director, is inclined towards transparency, and we had a discussion within the first week he was on about that kind of disclosure of documents. He and I are on the same page on that, so you can make requests to see the POs. As a department head, I would be really nervous because of the politicization and the polarization in the city to have the council considering every contract say $5,000 over for me. I like
Right.
to have a little bit of freedom and discretion, but you balance that in any public agency. You balance.
And having the discretion is one thing, but having the transparency is another. They're really
Right.
two separate issues. And to make sure that the council and the community knows what money's being spent, that's the important piece that I feel like's been missing.
Right.
That it's okay to have to let them have that discretion to spend up under 25,000, but we need to know. Everyone needs to know.
Well,
who's
and here's
spending
what
and
else
they're
it
spending on.
gets rid of. It also gets rid of the ability to finger point and say,
Exactly.
we're bankrupt because you spent $20,000 on X.
Well, in my department, one of the ways I've done that is, and this is just my choice, is when I have asked for a part-time temporary hire, which is a way to get around hiring during this era when the council doesn't want to hire and we're actually facing layoffs, you can do a part-time temporary hire. But what I put in my backup documentation is, yes, you can approve it this way, but it will cost you 40% more because that's what our contractor, our employment agency, temporary employment agency adds onto it. And that's fine as long as the council knows that that's what's going to happen. And so I put that into my language, and I don't know how many other departments do that, but for me, I think it's really important for people to know that what the choices they're making will mean.
Right. Right, and it's tough right now because there are no dollars, and so everything has to be scrutinized.
Right.
And you don't want to hamstring your department heads; they still have to do their jobs. And if everything's being squabbled on the council meetings are already 6 hours long. So if they're squabbling over, you need to hire somebody to finish this one project.
But we really also, as department heads, need to be very responsive to the public, understand that we need to be looking at the money we're spending also.
Right.
So.
Now, some residents have suggested that the mayor and city manager abuse. Oh, I just read that one. Some of the things we've been discussing can occur with a simple majority on the council passing a resolution. Others may be better suited to a citizens' initiative. Talk about the difference. Why? Because that came up at the last meeting.
Right.
Do we put it on? Does the city council put it on the ballot, or are they going to require the public to put it on the ballot? What's the difference?
If you have the political will on the council, it's a lot easier to do it that way. You need to convince a majority of the council to do this, and once you have that vote, then it goes onto the ballot. If you go for the initiative process, you have that 6-month signature gathering, which is just difficult. You have people standing out in parking lots trying to get signatures. It's your basic initiative process. But a benefit of that is I think you get a really clear idea of how popular what your initiative is, how it might play at the polls. So
You're doing your legwork up front.
You're doing your legwork up front. There's no guarantee those people are going to get out and vote, but I think you get a good idea
You look
where
at
you're heading.
the two pension reform initiatives, the one in San Diego and the one in San Jose, and they both passed by very large margins. And they went out and did the legwork. They went
Right.
out and got the signatures. They didn't do it through a vote of the councils in either case. And they had so many signatures in advance that it was pretty obvious that where this was headed. And then, of course, they both passed with large margins.
And you take the decision out of the hands of people who may have conflicted feelings about
Yeah.
what you're trying to accomplish.
Right, because they get their money from the bargaining units, and the bargaining units would be opposed to it. And it is what it is. You know, if a union gives you $50,000 to run your campaign, you're going to remember that when it comes time to make decisions about them.
Well, let me put you on the spot a little bit.
Oh, good.
And this is, and I've just
She loves that.
This is just a thought that just sort of popped into my head. But
Yes.
a lot of the things we've talked about, at least in the short term, can be dealt with through the city council taking action in the form of a resolution or at the council table directly, and then later on can be brought to the voters in another form. Can you, as the city clerk, put something on a council agenda, an action item, for them to begin to put in some of these transparency measures, to make it a city ordinance or whatever, whatever the language, resolution, to do these things, like, put out there the discretionary spending that's going on, to make that a rule, to say it has to be put on the website within a certain amount of time, or else. Can you do some of this stuff?
Yeah,
to
yeah,
take
I
the
could.
increase?
You could.
I could.
Yeah.
Yeah. Both as a department head and as an elected official, that dual role.
So now I'm going to ask the next question. Will you do it? Will you help us out here, and let's push some of this transparency stuff? Let's bring it forward.
Well, I think we can talk about
Okay.
that offline.
She needs to
like I
think it
said,
through.
I do need to think it through, and that's part of the problem of being that dual department head / politician. But my ultimate goal is to make the process of government as transparent as possible. So I'm not
And that's-
inclined to not support transparency.
And that's the campaign that you ran, and I think that's the main reason that you won, because you were the only one out there that really talked about the need to have this sort of independent city clerk who's just going to be as transparent and open as possible. And I really appreciated that. And I remember when you came and spoke to one of the neighborhood groups in my ward, and they were all just blown away by your level of professionalism and your desire to be transparent. So I love that we have this topic here, and I hope you do bring something forward. Even if it's not exactly what we're talking about here today, I think that's an area where you can be the leader in our elected offices to say, we're in this mess, and one of the things we need to do is just be more transparent so that people know what's going on and we don't get here again.
Now, I just got a text message from a listener. He says he's an attorney, and he says election costs are always paid by the city.
Well, there you go. And
And the listener
Just
is
a
Tim
plea-
Prince, so just so
Oh,
that we all
thank you,
know
Tim.
who called in. He says, "Great show. Election costs are always paid by the city." Thank you for listening. And so, as an attorney, there's the answer.
right, but the political reality is the city doesn't have
It doesn't have
the
the money,
money,
and that was the conversation at the dais.
right.
You know, if you have limited, is this how we want to spend our limited dollars?
And part of that conversation was also, staff time required. Well, you know what, we're going to pick up the staff time anyway. That's a function of the city clerk's office, so I don't think that should really be and also the city attorney's office in the process. But I know that right now we're reusing our paper.
Yeah.
We're down to a couple of reams of green paper, and it's, we're working with other departments just to get the paper we need. So coming up with a couple $100,000 for an election is challenging.
Now,
Well-
you talked about it being a function of the city clerk's office, but there's also an interplay with a couple other departments
Yes.
as well. So it's not just on you.
No, it's not. So you have the city clerk's office, which would be handling the election part. You have the city attorney's office, which would be reviewing all the process and making sure that was correct. Those would be the two big. But anytime you do something like this, it's going to affect city workers.
So we
City
have
Hall.
just about a minute left. Why
right.
don't you give your website information again and give your phone number so that listeners know how to engage? I mean, the purpose, one of the things that we want to accomplish on this show is that we want listeners and community members to feel empowered and engaged so that they can access the system and play a part in overcoming where we are right now. So,
Okay. Well, the city's website is one of the places you can get the information, and you go on there to www.sbcity.org. And if you go under How Do I, that will be pretty clear how to make a public records request. You can also call SB Direct 384-7272, or you can call my office at 384-5002 and just make a verbal request also.
Okay, can you give those phone numbers out one more time?
I'll do it slower this time.
Yes, and people are like writing really fast right now.
I've heard that complaint before, I'm sorry. 384-7272 is the SB Direct number. And that puts you into the call center, and they just relay the request to our office. If you want to call our office directly, it's, again, 909-384-5002.
Now, are you open 8 to 5 Monday through Thursday?
7:30 to 5:30 Monday through Thursday.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. This is our inaugural show for the Two Sides with Tobin and Erin.
Trying to update the webpage.
Well, yeah, so that we're going to post it to the webpage and the KCAA radio webpage. Thank you, Gigi Hanna, for being on our inaugural show.
I am so pleased to have been on the inaugural show.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you. So thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.